A monk at Fountains Abbey in Yorkshire fed 200 people for an entire year from a single managed plot of land. Not a season, not a few months, a full year. And that same land had been producing the same food, without interruption, for longer than the monk's great-grandfather had been alive. No fertilizer bought, no seeds bought, no one hired to run it after the third year. It cost nothing. You're spending between $3,000 and $5,000 a year on groceries right now. The system this monk used cost less than $100 to start. Medieval engineers paid nothing after the first year. One decision made in the first week of planting determines whether this system feeds you for 50 years or quietly collapses by autumn. That decision is coming up. You have probably already suspected that something like this existed. Something that worked so well that the people making money from your food bills had very good reasons to make sure you never heard about it in school. You're right. And the document that proves it has been sitting in a European archive since the year 812. That document is the Capitulare de Villis. It is a formal agricultural decree issued by the Emperor Charlemagne. Historian Rosamund McKitterick, in her book The Carolingians and the Written Word, published in 1989, describes it as one of the most detailed agricultural management documents surviving from medieval Europe. It listed 73 plants, not decorative plants, not garden plants for a palace, food plants, fruit trees, berry shrubs, root vegetables, nitrogen-fixing herbs, all planted together, all supporting each other, all producing food without being replanted once. Charlemagne did not invent this system. He was writing down something that had already been working for centuries before him. The question is why that system disappeared. That is what comes next. But the answer is not incompetence. It is not progress. It is something with a name and a date and a financial beneficiary. That name is coming shortly. The system is called a food forest, and the moment you understand what it is, you will realize you already knew it made sense. You have just never seen it described as a technology before. Here's the picture most people carry when they think about growing food. Straight rows, bare soil between the rows, one type of plant per row, a blank slate every spring, new seeds, new soil preparation, new inputs. That picture is less than 300 years old. It came from the industrial age. Before the factory model took over farming, growing food looked completely different. It looked like a forest, because it was one, a designed one. And the difference between these two approaches matters more than almost anything you have been told about food costs. A row garden dies every autumn. You pull it out, you dig it over, you buy seeds, you add fertilizer, you water from the beginning. Every spring, you start at zero. A food forest does not start at zero. It starts at last year plus growth. Every year, the soil gets richer without anyone adding anything. Every year, the roots go deeper and pull up minerals from layers a row garden never reaches. Every year, more food comes off it with less effort from you. Not marginal improvement, compound improvement. The same direction as your grocery bill, but running in the opposite direction. That is not a theory. That is over 1,400 years of documented, verifiable, named evidence. The reason this is not taught in every school garden program is not because someone made a mistake. It was not forgotten. It was made inconvenient. Not wrong. Inconvenient. The year it was made officially inconvenient has a name. It has a set of parliamentary laws behind it, and the families those laws hurt were not left with alternatives. They were not struggling. They were dying. That part of the history is coming up. But first, you need to understand exactly what a food forest is. Do you trust your tap water? The government and water companies are leaving dangerous toxins behind. Independent studies show chemicals they aren't even testing for. Your health is in your hands, not theirs. Stop paying for poisoned water. My guide reveals a $1 method to get 100% pure water at home. Scan the QR code or click the link below to get your free copy now. And exactly how it works. That is what comes next. A food forest has 7 layers. You already understand this even if you have never heard the word permaculture in your life. Think of any real forest you have walked through. At the very top, tall trees catching the most sunlight. Below them, smaller fruit trees. Below those, shrubs. Below those, herbs and tall plants. Below those, ground cover spreading across the soil surface. Below the soil itself, deep roots pulling minerals up from layers no other plant can access. And climbing through everything from ground level to canopy. Vines, using the structure other plants already built. 7 layers, each one doing a completely different job. Each one feeding something in one of the other layers. The whole structure holding itself together without anyone directing it. You did not need that explained. You recognized it the moment you heard it. Charlemagne's document from 812 lists plants for every single one of those layers. Walnut trees for the canopy, apple and pear for the sub-canopy layer, gooseberry and rose hip for the shrub layer, mint, sage, and fennel for the herb layer, strawberries for the ground cover, horseradish and skirret for the deep root layer, grapes for the climbing layer. Historian Anne Hagen, in her book A Handbook of Anglo-Saxon Food, published in 1992, documents the same multi-layer planting pattern in English monastic records, going back to the 7th century. Not the 9th, not the 8th, the 7th century. That is over 1,400 years of continuous documented evidence from a single region. The monks at Fountains Abbey, the Cistercian monastery established in 1132 in North Yorkshire, and described in detail by historian Glenn Kopak in his book Abbeys and Priories, published in 2006, ran food systems that produced enough to feed their entire community year-round. A community of up to 200 monks, not just feeding them, producing surpluses large enough to sell to surrounding villages, from a system that, once established, ran almost entirely without daily labor. That is not a legend. That is in the records. Not struggled, died, is the phrase that applies to what happened to ordinary people when the system was taken away from them. That is coming up after the history. The history is older than Charlemagne. Archaeological records, documented by Dave Jackie and Eric Tonesmeyer in their 2-volume Edible Forest Gardens, published by Chelsea Green in 2005, and considered the most comprehensive modern survey of the subject, show managed polyculture food systems in the Kerala region of India dating back at least 2,000 years. The same layered design, the same underlying logic. In West Africa, the same pattern appears in the Sahel agroforestry corridor. In pre-colonial Mesoamerica, the Milpa system integrated layered food production across generations. In early medieval Japan, the Satoyama landscape system combined forest management with food production in the same multi-layer approach. Every civilization that stayed in one place long enough eventually figured out the same thing independently. The forest feeds itself. You design a forest that produces food, the forest feeds you. This is not a regional discovery, it is a universal one. Every culture that looked carefully at how a natural forest sustains itself eventually copied the model, and the principle behind all of it starts with one idea so simple, it fits in a single sentence. The forest feeds itself. In a moment, you will see exactly how that principle works in a back garden that costs under $100 to start. Here is the number that should make you stop and recalculate. According to research published by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations in their 2013 report, Forests for Food Security and Nutrition, a single mature food forest on 1 acre of land can produce between 2 and 4 tons of food per year, without irrigation, without added fertilizer, without replanting, without any significant ongoing labor after year 5. That is the same acre that a conventional vegetable garden would produce less than half that yield from, with daily watering, with bought inputs, with starting from zero every single spring, without a bill, without a supplier, without a service contract. And almost nobody is using it. That is not an accident. Sit with that for a moment before moving on. The global seed market was valued at over $90 billion in 2022, according to a market analysis report by Grand View Research published the same year. $90 billion. That entire number depends on a single behavior, on you buying new seeds every year. A food forest does not buy new seeds, ever. The seeds are already inside it. They fall, they germinate, the system replaces itself continuously. An intact food forest cannot be invoiced. That is not a metaphor. It is a structural business problem for any company whose revenue model depends on annual inputs. The Enclosure Acts, passed by the British Parliament in successive waves between 1750 and 1850, systematically eliminated the common land where ordinary English rural families had been running polyculture food systems for generations. Not a few families, communities. Historian E.P. Thompson, in his landmark book The Making of the English Working Class, published in 1963, documents in precise detail what happened to the rural poor who lost access to that land. They had fed themselves from it for centuries. The land was not exhausted. The system was not broken. The access to it was ended by parliamentary statute. The alternative offered to these families was factory work in the industrial cities. Not struggled, died. Thousands of rural households that had been food self-sufficient for generations, that had never bought a seed or a bag of fertilizer in their lives, suddenly could not feed their children. The system did not fail them. Access to the system was made illegal. There is a difference, and you already knew it existed. You just did not have the paper trail in front of you until now. Not wrong. Inconvenient for specific people with specific financial interests in the outcome. So, what does this system actually look like in a space the size of a regular back garden? Think about the last time you made a long cooking stock. You did not start with water and nothing. You used bones or vegetables already on hand. You built on something already there. You took from it and added to it. The pot did not reset each morning. A food forest works by exactly the same logic. You plant it once, you take from it continuously, you add to it occasionally. It does not reset. Or think about a fruit tree you have walked past somewhere that has nothing to do with a garden center. An old one in a hedgerow at the corner of a park, at the edge of a churchyard. No one waters it, no one fertilizes it, no one planted it last spring. It simply produces fruit every year, because that is what a properly sited, properly supported plant does when you leave it alone to be what it is. Your food forest is a collection of those plants, designed so that each one supports the others. The mistake most people make when they first try this is not about which plants they choose, it is about spacing. It happens in the first week of planting, and it does not become visible until the third year, by which point it is too late to fix without starting over. In a moment, I will show you exactly what that mistake looks like. Stay with this, because it is the single difference between a system that runs productively for 5 decades and one that quietly collapses before you see your second autumn harvest. Here is what you need. I want to be honest about every number. 1 canopy fruit tree, a heritage variety, apple, pear, or cherry suited to your climate zone. Buy it as a bare root tree in late autumn or winter from a specialist heritage nursery, not a superstore garden center. The variety matters both for self-fertility and for staggering your harvest across the season, so you're not overwhelmed by one crop at one time. Cost, between $15 and $30, 2 nitrogen-fixing shrubs. Goomyberry, also called Elaeagnus multiflora, is the most productive option for temperate climates. It produces edible red berries and fixes atmospheric nitrogen into the soil at the same time. Siberian pea shrub works better in colder continental zones. These are not decorative additions. They are the fertility engine of the entire system. Remove them, and you are back to buying fertilizer. Cost, between $8 and $20 each. 4 comfrey plants. Buy them as root divisions, rather than seeds for faster establishment. The Bocking 14 cultivar is the one you want. It is a sterile hybrid that will not self-seed and spread into areas you do not want it. It will grow in the same position, doing the same job for 30 years without any maintenance from you. Cost, under $15 for 4 root divisions. 3 to 5 ground cover plants. Strawberry runners, creeping thyme, or white clover all work well, and each performs a different function simultaneously. Strawberries produce food. Creeping thyme suppresses weeds by outcompeting them at soil level. White clover fixes additional nitrogen and feeds pollinators all season. Cost, under $12 total for plugs or small pots. 1 climbing plant, a thornless blackberry, or a dessert grape variety, depending on your climate. Plant it at the outer edge of the system where it has light, and train it up a simple wire frame attached to an existing fence or wall. Cost, under $20. That is genuinely it. Total spend, between $60 and $100. 1 afternoon to plant, meaningful food production from year 2, a running system by year 5 that will still be producing food when your children are your current age. Compare that to $3,000 to $5,000 per year in grocery spending. The mathematics requires no commentary. Here is the one thing most people get wrong. They plant everything at its current size instead of its future size. A 2-year-old apple tree is a small, manageable thing. A 2-year-old goomy berry bush next to it looks fine. They seem to have space between them. The planting bed looks bare and the instinct is to fill it. So the beginner plants them close together because both are currently small. 10 years later, the apple tree has a canopy spreading 4 meters in every direction. The goomy beneath it is in near total shade. It has stopped producing berries, maybe dying, and you cannot transplant a fruit tree that has been establishing its root network in the ground for a decade without almost certainly killing it. You have lost 2 seasons identifying the problem, and you have lost the tree trying to fix it. Martin Crawford, founder of the Agroforestry Research Trust in Devon, England, and author of Creating a Forest Garden, published by Green Books in 2010, has been running a living documented food forest since 1991. It is one of the most studied examples in temperate Europe. Crawford is very specific on this point. A standard apple tree on a semi-dwarfing rootstock requires at minimum 4 meters of clear space around it at full canopy maturity. Your nitrogen-fixing shrubs go at the outer edge of that 4-meter radius, not inside it, at the edge, where they will still receive sufficient light to produce at year 12 and year 20. The step most people skip is measuring before planting. Not estimating, not eyeballing, measuring. Get a tape measure before a single plant goes in the ground. Mark every planting position with a cane. Walk around the canes. Check which direction the canopy shadow falls at noon in your location. In the northern hemisphere, the canopy shadow falls northward. Your most light-hungry plants belong on the south side of the tree, never the north side. The comfrey, which thrives in partial shade, belongs in the northward half-shade zone where almost nothing else grows well anyway. This geometric understanding of a food forest was not modern horticultural advice. The Cistercian monasteries laid out their orchards by the same logic. Historian Roberta Gilchrist, in her book Medieval Life, Archaeology and the Life Course, published by Cambridge University Press in 2012, documents consistent east-west orientation patterns across surviving Cistercian garden plans throughout England. The orientation was not aesthetic, it was functional. Shadow management is as old as the system itself. It was taught, it was passed down through generations of monastic training, and then it stopped being taught. at exactly the moment it became commercially inconvenient for it to be widely known. The comfrey deserves its own paragraph because the monks at Fountains Abbey used it in almost every corner of their productive land, and for a reason that modern soil science has now fully explained. Comfrey roots grow to a depth of approximately 2 meters. That is roughly the height of a tall man, straight down. At that depth, the roots access calcium, potassium, and phosphorus that no annual vegetable plant can reach. The leaves then grow, die back, and decompose on the surface, releasing those minerals directly into the top soil layer where everything else feeds. Historian Maud Grieve, in her book A Modern Herbal, first published in 1931 and drawing on documented records reaching back to the 14th century, notes comfrey as one of the most consistently planted soil improvement and medicinal plants across every recorded medieval garden system in England. It was not coincidence that it appeared in all of them. It was in all of them because all of them depended on it. You plant comfrey once. It runs a mineral pump from 2 meters below ground to the surface for the rest of your life. You never buy potassium or phosphorus fertilizer again. Not reduced. Eliminated. Now think about what a community of hundreds did with this same principle running at full scale. Historian Delahook, in her book Trees in Anglo-Saxon England, published by Boydell Press in 2010, documents entire Anglo-Saxon villages in early medieval England whose primary food supply came from managed polyculture orchard and woodland systems. Not from row crop agriculture, from designed food forests managed collectively as community resources. These systems produced food, timber, building material, animal fodder, and medicine simultaneously from the same piece of land. 1 acre. 7 simultaneous functions, 0 waste between them. The St. Gall Monastery Plan is the oldest surviving detailed architectural layout drawing of a European settlement. It was produced around 820 AD and is held today at the Abbey Library of St. Gall in Switzerland. It shows the monastery's kitchen garden laid out in a multi-layer planting scheme with specific plants labeled at each layer. The person who drew that plan did not label it as an experimental design or a new approach. They drew it as the obvious way to grow food, because for the community reading that plan at the time it was drawn, it was obvious. It was the only system that made sustained sense. At community scale, the numbers become staggering. Jackie and Tonesmeyer calculate in Edible Forest Gardens that a well-established community food forest running at the scale of historical monastic operations produces more complete nutrition per acre than any monoculture crop system while requiring less than 10% of the equivalent labor input. A community of 200 people managing 20 acres of established food forest would spend fewer total hours per week on food production than a similar community running a conventional market garden of the same total area. Less work, more food, for longer, without buying anything, no bills, no infrastructure, no asking anyone's permission. One condition where this system works less well is coming up. You should hear it before you start. The food forest does not produce on demand. That is the honest limitation, and I will not soften it. A row garden gives you a harvest on a schedule you set. You plant courgettes in May, and you harvest courgettes in July. A food forest gives you harvests on nature's schedule, not yours. You will have more cherries in 3 weeks of June than your household can eat. You will have no cherries in July. You will have an abundance of apples across 4 weeks of autumn. Then no fresh apples until the same 4 weeks next year. If your household needs specific vegetables in specific quantities on specific days across every week of the year, this system is not built for that. It produces seasonal abundance, not controlled precision. Most households run it alongside a small annual bed for cut and come-again salads and seasonal vegetables. The two systems complement each other well. It also takes time to reach full productivity. Crawford's records from the Devon Research Forest show that full productive capacity in a temperate climate is typically reached between year 7 and year 10. You will see meaningful food from year 2, real significant harvests from year 4. But the complete, self-sustaining system, the one that required almost no labor at Fountains Abbey and produced surpluses year after year, takes a full decade to mature, if you are renting, if you expect to move within 3 to 5 years. This is not your moment for the full system. Plant a single fruit tree and 4 comfrey plants wherever you are. Start the logic. Come back to the full design when you have land you will keep. And in very small spaces, under 25 square meters, you are building a simplified 2 or 3 layer version rather than the full 7. That is still dramatically more productive per square meter than a conventional raised bed or container garden. But it is not the same system. And being clear about that before you start saves frustration later. The monks at Fountains Abbey are centuries gone. The abbey stands today as a roofless ruin in North Yorkshire, managed by English heritage as a monument to what was built and sustained there across 4 centuries of continuous occupation. But some of the old orchard trees on that estate are still producing fruit, not replanted, not managed, producing. Because a well-designed food system does not require the person who built it to keep running. The design carries itself. The physics still works. The soil biology still works, the nitrogen cycle still works. The mineral pump that comfrey roots run 2 meters below the surface still works exactly the way it did when Charlemagne's administrators wrote it down in 812. The plants do not read history. They do not know they are supposed to be an inconvenient idea. They grow. What you build in your back garden runs by the same logic, the same 7 layers, the same nitrogen economy, the same self-sustaining structure that fed Cistercian communities in Yorkshire, royal estates in Carolingian France, village commons in Anglo-Saxon England, and monastery gardens from Ireland to the borders of the Byzantine Empire for over 1,400 years before anyone decided it was more profitable to sell you a bag of fertilizer and a paper packet of seeds every spring. I do not know what brought you here. Maybe you are tired of the grocery bill and you suspected there was something older and simpler that someone had quietly shelved. Maybe you have planted a row garden for 5 years running and watched it die every October and wondered what you were missing. Maybe you just recognized, the way most sensible people eventually do, that something this fundamental could not possibly have been unsolved until the modern era. You wanted someone to confirm what you already half knew. It does not matter which one it was. It works either way.